Good afternoon. So we are going to start a two-part class this week, and next week we're going to continue it. So we switched around, so I will be here next week as well, and we're going to finish the class that we started this week because I wanted to learn something on Purim, and if we wait till 2 weeks from now, it will be post-Purim, which doesn't mean that it's not relevant anymore, but it still is more enjoyable to learn it before Purim. In general, all the Chassidus on Purim is some of my personal favorite ideas to learn. I find it to be extremely, there's so many beautiful, rich, deep, prevalent ideas in the Chassidus on Purim. And so what we're going to learn today is a mimer from the Rebbe. And I actually wanted to learn parts of it inside, where we'll read some of it from the actual text. We're not going to read all of it from the actual text because then we won't have time to finish it in 2 classes. But we will read some of the ideas from the actual text, so you can just follow along with me. I will translate and explain everything, so you don't have to be too scared of the Hebrew text. So yeah, this is a mimer from the Rebbe, and it was said in 1965. So the mimer opens up with the words "Balayla hu nadida shnas hamelech." On that night, the king's sleep was disturbed. So we're probably familiar with the Purim story, but where exactly in the Purim story does this pasuk fall? On that night, the king's sleep was disturbed. Is on the night after the first party that Queen Esther made for him. So let's just do a little story recap until that point. We open up the story of Purim. The Jews are in exile, and they're spread out throughout the Babylonian Empire, which turned into the Persian Empire. And so they're spread out throughout the Persian Empire, and King Ahasuerus is the king, and he makes this big feast, and many of the Jews go to the feast, even though Mordechai tells them that they should not go to the feast. So many of the Jews do partake in this feast, which is considered not such a good thing that they do. And then after this, and at the feast, the king invites out Vashti. She doesn't want to do what he wants him to do. And basically what this leads to is Haman rising in power. And Haman is a notorious Jew hater, and he tries to convince the king to sign a decree that the Jews will be wiped out. And until this point the king also needs to replace his queen because his queen was killed. So he has this beauty pageant, and Esther ends up in the palace. And this is considered a tragic event that a Jewish woman is forced into this position of being Ahasuerus' queen. But when her uncle or cousin, depending on what commentary you want to learn, Mordechai finds out about the decree against the Jews, he sends a message to her, and he tells her, this is why you ended up in the palace, was to help save the Jewish people. So Esther is not allowed to go to the king uninvited, but she goes before the king, and she invites him to a feast. And miraculously, he accepts, even though she goes against the protocol of the palace. And he accepts, and he comes to the feast, and she invites Haman along too. And they have a feast, and all that she tells the king at that feast is that she invites him to another party and tells him that she has something to tell him. So she doesn't actually say anything to him at this point. So I guess think about it from the king's perspective, like, why is his wife inviting him to one feast, and just for the sake of inviting him to another one? It's kind of strange behavior. So from his perspective, he's like, what's going on? So that night, he's not able to sleep well. Because the night of the feast, he's not really able to sleep, because he's trying to figure out what's going on. It disturbs his sleep, this whole story that happens. And we know that what happens when he's trying to sleep is that he calls his court, I don't know what we would call them, his report, but not really a reporter. They're more like the bibliographers. They're the ones who are writing down everything that happens to him. And he has them read to him about what happened to him, about occurrences that happened to him. And he is reminded of a time when Mordechai saved his life, which is referenced in the beginning of the Megillah. So he's reminded of a time when Mordechai saved his life. And at that moment, he sees Haman also in his courtyard. And he asks Haman, what should I do to a man who saved my life, who I want to honor? It doesn't say saved my life, but who I want to honor. And Haman says, you should parade him through the streets wearing your crown and on your royal throne, and say, thus should be done to a man who the king wishes to honor, right? So at this point, though, we see that there's a turning point in the story. Until this night, everything that's happening seems to be pretty bad. Bad for the Jews. The Jews are sinning, they're going to the party. They're messing up in lots of ways. That's on the perspective of the Jews. And then from the perspective of the kingdom, Haman is rising to power. Haman is influencing the king. There's decrees against the Jews. Esther is caught in the palace in such an uncomfortable position. She's risking her life to go to the king. Like, it's all negative sort of feeling. And then at this point, the story shifts. Once Achashverosh lets Mordechai parade through the streets in his royal clothes, even Haman's wife herself tells Haman, that's it, you're done. Your downfall starts here. Because when the Jews are rising, their enemies fall. And so when she sees that Mordechai is being honored in this way, she knows that that's it. Their role is over. And like we said, after this, she invites him to the second party, and she tells him that Haman is trying to kill her, and the king gets very upset, and he allows the Jews to defend themselves, and that's how we have the whole miracle of Purim. So, like we said, this line symbolizes a turning point in the story. So I'll read a little bit inside. Balayla hu nadida shnas hamelach. On that night, the king's sleep was disturbed. Vayomer lahavi as sefer hazachrones divrei yamim, and he asked to bring the book of Chronicles. Vayihu nekram l'fnei melach, and they were read before the king. That's the pasuk that we are quoting. Balayla hu nadida shnas hamelach. V'tzarich lahavin. We need to understand. Aimrei balayla hahu. It says on that night. Delachira, seemingly, gam kishahaya aimer balayla stam, even if it just said the word balayla at night, hayu yaidim shakai al halayla shaba hayu hama'airais haksuvim bepsakim shalafanav. We would have known that it's referring to the night that came after the ideas that were discussed in the previous psukim. So we're asking a question over here, and it's a little bit of a nuanced question. We know that every single word that is written down in Tanakh is extremely, extremely specific, and there are no extra words ever. So if a word is there, it means it has a purpose. And the question we're asking is, why does it have to say balayla hahu? This question doesn't translate as well into English as it does from the Hebrew, so bear with me. But we can say balayla hu means on that night. It could have, and this pasuk is coming right after the story of the feast, so it could have just said at night. It could have just said balayla nadida shnas hamelach. The king's sleep was disturbed. He went from the party. Balayla nadida shnas hamelach. At night, his sleep was disturbed. The word that seems to be extra. The fact that we're emphasizing that it was that night, the night of that feast, seems to be an extra word. And so that's what we're going to try to understand. What is the significance of this word hahu? That night. And how are we going to explain this? We're going to explain this according to something that the Maharil teaches. The Maharil wrote a lot of notes into like the Sidurim and Nusach of how we read things. And he says that when the Baal Kaira gets up to, the person who's reading the Megillah, gets up to the words balayla hahu, he's supposed to raise his voice and say it in a louder voice. So this year, when you go listen to the Megillah, pay attention, and you're going to see that when the Baal Kara comes to this pasuk of Balayla Hu, he's going to say it louder than everything else that he reads. And he explains, why are we reading it louder? Why are we reading this verse louder? This is because he quotes the Yalkut Shemaini, which is like a medrash that says that on that night, the sleep of the king was disturbed. When we're talking about the sleep of the king, we're not talking about the king Ahasuerus, we're talking about the king Hashem. And this is a theme throughout the Megillah. In the Megillah itself, there is no mentioning of Hashem's name. There's no Hashem's, it's the one book in Tanakh, right? There's literally not a single mention of Hashem's name. And we're gonna explain this idea a little bit further later on. It's because the whole content of the Megillah, the whole story of the Megillah is about concealment, about darkness. And a name, darkness, hiding, concealment. And a name is revelation. So throughout the Megillah, there is no name of Hashem because the Megillah is representing a time of darkness and presence in darkness, which is what we're going to talk about a little bit later. But when we say, so if Hashem's name is not mentioned, what do the Mefarshim explain? What do the commentaries explain? They explain that whenever it says Hamelech, it has a double meaning. The king has a double meaning. It sometimes is on one level of understanding, it refers to the king Ahasuerus, and on a deeper level of understanding, you have to probe, you have to look a little deeper and see how that is really referring to Hashem, and that is where Hashem shows up in the Purim story. So what we're saying over here is that on that night, this king's sleep was disturbed. The king wakes up. That means that Hashem woke up. That's a strange thing. Don't we say, Hine layanum v'layishan shemer Yisrael? That the Hashem, the guardian of Yisrael, doesn't sleep or slumber. That's what the line says, right? Hashem doesn't sleep. Hashem doesn't sleep. So what does it mean that Hashem is sleeping? What does it mean that Hashem is sleeping? So the Yalkut Shemaini says that, and I'll read it, that the king's sleep was disturbed, that when the Jewish people are in a state of sleeping, it creates a sleepiness, so to speak, in Hashem. So Hashem reflects our level of alertness. If we are sleeping, which when we talk about sleeping, we're going to discuss what exactly does that mean that we're sleeping. But on a very basic level, when we're tuned out, right? When you're sleeping, you're tuned out. You're not invested. You're not involved. You're not so aware of the truth of reality when you're sleeping. Sometimes it's a blessing, right? We like to go to sleep to be able to escape from the truths of our lives. It's a little bit of a space where we're not like confronted with truth. And so sleeping is this state of just being in a lacking awareness. And similarly, what happens is when we sleep, God, so to speak, goes to sleep, which means that he also just tunes out of the reality of what's going on earth. So if we say that the Purim story is a story where God's name is not mentioned and where God's presence is not felt, it's because Hashem, until now, he's taking a little nap. He's not really investing himself into the story. He's sort of letting nature play out as it wants to play out. And that's not leading to very positive outcomes. Obviously, we want God to be invested in us, to be taking care of us like a parent, right? A parent can't sleep on the job. You have to be awake. You have to be alert. So why is it that we raise our voice when we say that the Nadida Shnas HaMelech, Balayla Hu Nadida Shnas HaMelech? It's because, like we said before, this is the turning point in the story because now God wakes up. Right? God wakes up, and now the miracles can happen. Until now, we're working within the natural order, and it's sort of kind of negative. And now Hashem wakes up, and that's a very positive thing. He now is invested, and like we say, we see the whole story turning. And similarly, like we said, it says also in Shir Hashirim, it says, Ani yashena v'libi er, I am asleep, but my heart is awake. And the Zohar explains that this is bigalusa, when we are in galus, ta'al yedei hashena di Yisrael bizman galus, that when the Jewish people were kind of in a sleepy state during galus, gam garm heim garmim shena kaviyachol lamayla, it causes sort of a drowsiness above. So, like we said, again, that when we're in galus, which means that we're removed from revelation, it's not, what is sleeping? Sleeping is, like we said before, it's not, the truth is not obvious, we're not quick, we're not attuned, we're in a darker state. Our consciousness is not present. Our brains are not turned on. They're taking a rest. And so we're sort of maybe hanging out somewhere in our subconscious, but our conscious minds are not fully working. And we could assume that this sort of has a little bit of a negative connotation, being asleep, right? We don't want to be asleep on the job. We want to be alert and awake. So, so now we're going to explain a little bit more about this concept of sleeping at night and how we wake up. Okay, so v'zehu shebelayla ahu nadina shnas hamelech, and this is where it's when it says on that night the king was sleeping. Hu ikare shel nes. The king woke up, not the king was sleeping. The king was sleeping and then he wakes up. Hu ikare shel nes. This is the main miracle of the Purim story, is the fact that God woke up. Laila hu zman hagalas. Night refers to the time of exile. Shehu zman shel shena, because it's a time when we're sleeping. L'mayla, above. V'zeh shebelayla ahu galas nadida shnas hamelech. The fact that the king woke up, even though we were still in a state of darkness, even though it's still nighttime, malka shel elam hu ikar shel nes. This is the main miracle. So it's not that the galus was over. The galus continued. It was still night, right? It was still night. That night, the king is awake. What do you usually do at night? Usually at night, you sleep. But this night, the king is awake. So it means that we're in a state of darkness, right? Lila is a time of darkness, but we're still managed to be awake. This is we're a little technical. We're first asking all our questions and we build up all the technicalities and then we get to answer them. But, so we're setting up our scene over here. So it's nighttime, it's dark, but the king wakes up. We're awake. We have a certain level of awareness and presence. And so now we're going to talk about, in general, one of the big themes of the Purim story. Val pisa yesh levar diaka kasav balaylahu. And so now we're going to go back to our original question, which we said was, why does it have to say that night? Why doesn't it just say at night? Why does it say balayla hahu, on that night? Hu lashain nister. Hu is a language of hiding. Myra al helem. It signifies concealment. Shenaisaf al helem vehester de galus, that in addition to the darkness and hiding of galus bichlal in general, hine az, then bimei Achashverosh, in the time of Achashverosh, excuse me, haya helem vehester oidiyser hester kafel. There was an extra darkness, a double darkness. So the reason it says Laila Hahu is to teach us that on that night, which means in general, during the galus of the time of the Megillah story, it wasn't just that it was dark, it was double dark. Why does it teach us that it was double dark? Because hu, in general, the word hu, is a language of hiddenness. Why is hu a language of hiddenness? There are two ways you can refer to something in Hebrew. So we're all familiar with another time when we talk about balayla. In the Manashtana, we all sing Halayla ha. What do we say in the Manashtana? Halayla ha, hazeh, right? Halayla ha, right? So we say in the Manashtana we say Balayla hazeh. What's Halayla hazeh? Halayla hazeh means this night. Laila hahu means that night. Okay? So this night versus that night. Hu versus zeh. Zeh means I am pointing to something. It is obvious and clear in front of me. Right? When I say this thing, this cup, you all see it. It's all obvious to you. You know what it is. If I mentioned, I have that cup in the kitchen, do you see that cup? No, because it's that one. It's somewhere else. It's somewhere obscure. When something is obvious and clear in front of me, it's this. When something is not clear in front of me, it's that. Right? So we understand the difference between these two languages. So the time, if we think about, we're going to get into this a little bit more in depth a little later, the story of Mitzrayim is a different kind of miracle than the story of Purim. The miracle of leaving Egypt is full of open, revealed miracles. Very obvious that it's coming from Hashem. You can't deny it, right? They're all supernatural miracles. We have the Makkais and the sea is splitting and all these crazy things happening that are completely out of the realm of nature. But with the Purim story, there is not one supernatural thing that happens. Especially if you take into consideration, the Purim story happened over like a number of years. A long time, I think 9 years from the beginning to the end. So think about that. We condensed the whole story into a 1 hour reading. So when you take any 9 years and you choose all the facts that sort of came together to come to the results into 1 hour, then yeah, sure, it sounds like, you see how all the pieces fit together, right? That's just how the world works. But when you're living through it, does it feel miraculous at all? No, these are just different political events going on, different events, one event here, one event there. We don't see the thread. It's not a revealed, obvious miracle at all. Not like Pesach. And so the whole nature of Purim is this nature of Hahu. It's not Hazeh, where I can point and say, Zeh, this is my God who's doing this. God is he's in a very hidden way. And so we say it's not just a regular level of hidden, though. The Purim story is all about hiddenness. Let's talk about what is the Megillah called? Megillas Esther. Esther is our heroine. The famous Gemara says, Esther min atera minayin. Where does this concept, this name Esther, come from? V'anaychi hastir astir. I am going to hide myself. And he doesn't just say v'anaychi astir, I'm going to hide myself. He says hastir astir, a double language of hiddenness. And the Baal Shem Tov teaches us, what does it mean? Why is it this double hiddenness? What does double hiding mean? Double hiding means that you're in galus and you're in darkness, but even that is hidden to you. So you don't recognize that you're in a state of darkness. We could talk about this, and to understand this, we could talk about it in our regular sleep, right? We're using sleep as an example for galus. So in Hebrew, there's a number of words for sleep. You can say shena, which is considered to be more like a light nap, versus a tardema is like a deep, heavy sleep. And how do we differentiate between these two? When you're taking a nice little shena nap, and you have a dream, you know how sometimes you have a dream, and even while you're dreaming, you're still a little bit, it's like a lucid dream. So you have an awareness while you're having the dream, this is only a dream. This doesn't make sense. This is not real. This is just a dream. You have the awareness even while you're in the dream that it's a dream. Has anyone else experienced that? It's almost like I know, in a sense, I could almost control where the dream is going to go because enough of my conscious mind is present in the moment because it's not a total deep sleep. So I know I'm sleeping, I know I'm dreaming. You can almost get yourself up if it's really uncomfortable. Versus sometimes you have a dream that feels so real. And those are the dreams that really shake us up because when you wake up, you still think that you're within that dream. And so what does that mean? That the sleep is so deep that I don't realize that I'm asleep. I'm not conscious of the fact that I am asleep. That's how deep the sleep is. So when we talk about the fact that the time of the Purim story is this anachi hastir astir, this double, this laila hahu, night and hu. two languages of concealment. We're having this theme of two languages of concealment. It's that the Jews are in a state of real darkness, but we don't recognize the darkness. We don't recognize that it's so dark. And I think there's probably some parallels to us now, right? We're in Gullus, we're in a state of darkness, but thank God a lot of us feel very comfortable and happy, and we have good things most of the time. So that leads to us not to recognize or not to perceive on like a very real level, right? In like a visceral way that we are in Gullus. We could think about it, or when something bad happens, we say, "Ay Gullus." But when we're in a just regular going about our day-to-day lives, we think things are normal. But really, we're dreaming. We don't realize we're dreaming. But our life is this dream. But we think it's the reality. And that's sort of the state that the Jewish people were in during the time of the Megillah, is in this doubled up darkness where they think they're awake, but in actuality, they are sleeping. So, going back to our original question, the reason it says Balayla Hahu is to emphasize to us what a great miracle it was that the king woke up. How that's the real nace over here, that the king woke up, because even though we were in a state of sleep, and not only were we in a state of sleep, but we're in this deep, doubled up state of sleep. And we said, how does Hashem operate? Is that he's reflecting off of us. So if we're in a deep sleep, Hashem should also be in a deep sleep. But no, even though it's Laila Hahu, even though it's that dark, doubled up night, Hashem still wakes up. We're getting to that right now. Okay. So why did Hashem wake up? What spurred the waking up? If we're not awake, then Hashem should also not be awake. Why did he just suddenly wake up? So first of all, he's Hashem, so he could choose that, okay, the people aren't doing their part, I need to intervene. That's one way that it could work, right? But in this case, it actually says, and we're gonna the answer is gonna give us a question that we're not gonna answer till next week. So I'm sorry, but we have to go in order, right? But basically, why did they wake up? Is because even though we were in a state of darkness, there is a power that we can access even in darkness within ourselves. What is sleeping when we're asleep? Which part of us is sleeping is our conscious mind. But which part of us is still awake? Which part of you never really goes to sleep? Is your subconscious, right? That's why you dream when you're asleep. It's all your dreams are coming from your subconsciousness. So even though we were sleeping, we still had access to the deepest parts of ourselves. And therefore, during this time, despite the fact that we're so far from Hashem, the Jewish people acted with Mesiras nefesh. That's how it explains that Mordechai gathered everybody up. And the Jewish people, this is like a chiddush of the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe teaches that there was an opportunity for the Jews to convert. If they renounced their Judaism, they would have been spared from Haman's decree. But the Jewish people did not convert. They did not choose to convert. They did not choose to renounce their Judaism, even though there was that potential to save their lives. And that is something that we call Mesiras nefesh. So the fact that the Jewish people were not converting and were not changing their religion, not letting go of their religion, was them accessing their Mesiras nefesh. Mesiras nefesh comes from a place that's deeper than consciousness. It's not a conscious choice. It's not a choice that's logical, that makes sense. It's a choice that comes because renouncing God goes against the essence of my being. And the essence of my being is still around even when I'm asleep. I'm answering it together. I am bringing a little bit of the answer in, so it's not too bad. But basically the point is that the reason Hashem woke up was in response to this Mesiras nefesh of the Jewish people. That's what aroused Hashem to wake up from his sleep. That makes sense for now? Is that good enough for now? Okay. So because of the Mesiras nefesh of the Jewish people, Hashem wakes up from his sleep. And so we can answer the potential question we can ask on that is, okay, so if they have Mesiras nefesh, that means they're not in such a deep sleep. But that's why I sort of prefaced that by saying that Mesiras nefesh is something that you can access. It's not from the conscious mind, it's from the superconscious mind. So it's accessible even during sleep, right? Okay. So now we're going to start getting a little bit more into this discussion of hu and zeh. We're going to talk about darkness versus light and the advantage of darkness over light. And typically when we talk about the advantage of darkness over light, it's because we're looking at the end advantage of light that comes after the darkness. That was a little bit of a confusing sentence, right? But usually when we talk about, darkness is positive, it's because we say that there's a light that's going to come after the darkness, and you're going to appreciate it more because it was dark before, right? Well, that's, I think, something we've heard. Over here, we're going to say that we're not talking about the light that comes after darkness, but that there is an advantage in darkness just for itself. Darkness meaning lack of expression, right? So light, what is light? Light is expression, sharing. So if we think about just like on a very physical level, what is light? You have a source of light, let's say the sun, or a light bulb, or whatever it is that is providing your light. And then we have beams that come out of the source, rays that come out of the source of light. So those rays are an expression of the source of light. They express the source of light. Would you be able to go into the sun itself? No. If you go into the sun itself, you would burn up because the source of the light is too intense. We can only handle a ray. Is the ray of light the same as the sun? No, that's the point. It is completely derived from the sun. It contains a part of the sun, but it is not the sun, right? It's not the sun itself. So we're going to read a little bit inside, and we're going to come back to this idea. So right now, just if you are following along inside, we are in Eis Gimel. We're about to start Eis Gimel, okay? So v'yuvan zeh behektim, and to understand this, we're going to preface b'mevor b'Torah Ar, b'Drushay Purim. We're going to preface what it explains in Torah Ar on Purim. U'ba'arucha b'Drush Admar Amtzai, and at length the Mitzler Rebbe explains it. The b'yayim giloi u'b'layla helem. In day, which is revelation, and night, which is darkness, each contains a subcategory of darkness and light. So we have Yaim is day. Day is light. Light is revelation. Laila is night. Night is dark, concealment, right? Each of these, light and dark, contain subcategories. They each contain, there is the light that is within day and the darkness that is within day. And there is the light that is within night and the darkness that is within night. And how are these categories broken up? Like we mentioned earlier, we have hu and zeh. So again, there are places where it says yaim ha hu. Probably a reference that will come to your mind with Yaimahu is B'Yaimahu Yiyah Hashem Echad. On that day, Hashem will be one. It's referring to when Mashiach comes. And then there are Hayayim Hazeh, different places where it says on this day. And similarly with Laila, we have B'Laila Hazeh and B'Laila Hahu. So in each category of light and dark, there's a hidden element and a concealed element. And what do these refer to? V'nekudas habir b'zeh, da'achiluk ben yom v'layla hu behem atzmam, de'yom hu ar v'layla hu chayshach. So the difference between light and dark day and night is simple. That the day is light and the night is dark. That it says right when Hashem was creating the world is that He called light yom, which means the very nature of day is that it is light. Ulachayshach kara laila, and to darkness he called night. So it's almost like they're synonymous. Light is day, and darkness is night. We just changed the clock, so we have a little bit of this experience, right? Where we see that like our day is longer. Is the day actually longer? Depending how you're counting your day. If you think that day is light, which seemingly that's what it is, then yes, that the day is actually longer. Dilashain zeh b'nagea l'yayim v'layla meira al hayayim v'alayla k'maisha nimshecha lamata b'giloi. So when we say zeh, when we say yayim hazeh, or we say layla hazeh, what are we referring to? We're referring to the concepts of day and night as they come into the world in a revealed way. We know that everything physical in this world has a spiritual source. So above, there is a concept as well in heaven, in the spiritual realms, there is a concept of day and night. Does it look the same as it looks down here on earth? Probably not, right? Because it's not, day and night in the spiritual sense is not being controlled by the sun and the moon, by light and darkness. So the way that day and night play out on earth, the way day and night reveal themselves is called Yayim Hazeh and Laila Hazeh. The way day and night are in their essence by Hashem, the essential element, the spiritual element of day and night, that is referred to as Yayim Hahu and Laila Hahu. This is a little confusing. I hope I'm making sense. So we have night as it is in its source above, and day as it is in its source above, and that's called Yaim and Laila Hahu. Why is it called Hahu? Because it's not our reality. Our reality we point to and we say, Zeh, this. Hashem's reality we point to, or the source of something we point to and we say, Hu, that, because it's hidden from us. Versus when it comes out into our reality, into the created world, then it could be referred to as Zeh. So this is why when we refer to Mashiach, again, we say by Yom Hahu, on that day, because that is not our reality right now. It still seems to be something that we don't know, that's removed from us, that's not part of our experience. Versus, again, like we said, when they were talking about Yetzias Mitzrayim, that was their experience right then. When it talks about Yetzias Mitzrayim, it said, Balayla Hazeh, like that this happens to me right now. This is my lived experience as I am experiencing. So if we make it very simple, we could just say, Zeh is how something comes out, and it's a revealed, sort of evolved state. And Hu is something as it is in its source, which is not so accessible to us, but how it is above in its source beyond our experience. So is everyone with me? Yeah, we have the differences between Laila Hahu and Laila Hazeh. And like we said before, so we gave examples of Mashiach and also of Yetzias Mitzrayim. Now is when we start to get also a little bit, we're going to go deeper into this. Didn't we just say that Hu is darkness? Yeah, right? We said that Hu is concealment. If we're talking about something like Mashiach or something like Hashem and how things exist by Hashem, wouldn't we think that should be more revelation, not referred to as darkness? Is that a fair question? Like, shouldn't we refer to things as they are by Hashem, the true source of all light, as revelation? Why is it that when they come down here, they're called revelation, and as they are in their source, they're called darkness? And so to answer that, we're going to take an example from our own selves, because that makes it easier for us to understand. And then obviously when we're applying it back to God, it's not exact comparison. But just to understand this idea, think about your deepest emotions, your deepest feelings, or even your deepest thoughts, your ideas as they are when they are first born in your brain at the first moment of understanding an idea with all of its depth. Are those emotions shareable? Your deepest emotions, are they shareable? So you can say that, yes, they are shareable. But what happens when you start to share them? They're going to lose some of their potency. They're going to lose some of their strength. Because a rule that exists is that the more you reveal something, revelation to someone else is concealment to the source. Revelation to another requires me to conceal part of the source of what I'm trying to share. Because it's impossible to capture the depth of my experience into words. You can't capture the depth of your experience and share it with someone else. Automatically, you're going to go through some sort of like birer sifting process where you choose which parts of this are revealable. Like sometimes you'll see like, oh, when there's like a baby that's like so cute, and this will be like coming from the mother will sometimes just be like, I just want to smush you, right? Like, there's no words that you can express the feeling that's in that moment, so you're just sort of like trying to come up with something, but even within that itself, you're showing that this is not expressible. And sometimes even those words feel like they cheapen the feeling, because words, expression, doesn't capture the depth of something. If you want to capture something in its absolute fullness, in its deepest sense, it needs to stay inside of you. You can't share it. And so similarly, when it comes to, obviously, like we said before, it's like making a separation because we're talking about God. But when it comes to godliness, if Hashem is revealing, as long as Hashem is in a state of revelation, that means that his essence is hidden. As long as we can feel like we're experiencing godliness, that means Hashem himself is hidden. Because revelation is so small. It's only a little bit of what is being shared. So this is why dark things as they are in their source are called hu. That, which means hidden. Because in the source, it is hidden. Then it comes out down into this world, and then it becomes zeh. It becomes revealed. But is the revelation, does it contain the same depth as the thing that is hidden? No. So we want revelation. We want it to come out. We want to be able to experience it the same way in any sort of human relationship. We need that expression. The relationship runs on the expression. But we also need to understand that the expression is not capturing the essence of the relationship. It's not capturing the whole point of the relationship. It's a way that we keep the relationship going. It's a way that we're able to feel and experience and be part of it. But it's not the core of it. So this is why it's an interesting thing that it says that when Hashem chooses to share Laila Hahu with us, Laila Hahu, as it comes down into this world, Laila Hahu, meaning Hashem's Laila as it exists above, whatever that means. And we're going to get into it more next week because we have to wrap up now. So we'll wrap up now, and we're going to explore this much more next week. We're going to get into the really deep stuff next week. But when something, Laila Hahu, which we said is higher than Laila Hazeh, right? It's something as it is, as its essence. But when it comes down here, it feels super, super dark. It feels like a lack of communication. And it's like if someone is feeling something very intensely, they're feeling a feeling so intensely, but they haven't yet come up with a word to communicate it to me, that means they're quiet. And from my perspective, from the recipient's perspective, I feel like it's so, they're not communicating with me. They're quiet. They're not telling me how they feel. I feel so distant from them. But really, they're just trying to formulate how to share the depth of that feeling with me. So in the moment of the essence of the feeling, we feel far. So when God allows the Laila Hahu to come down into this world, it feels extremely, extremely dark. And our experience of it is that it is much lower, that we're in a very, very, very low, that we're in a very, very low time. But really, we're accessing a super deep place. And we're just going to end off with one last point, which is we already started mentioning. When we're in darkness, when we're living in a state of darkness, what we need to cultivate is our power of emunah. Because there's two ways Hashem allowed us to know him. He put himself into creation so that we could know him, and created the world in a way that we could understand God with our intellect, with our minds. But when it's dark, it becomes much harder to know him with your mind, because like we said before, your mind goes to sleep. So when it's dark, what is the part of us that we need to cultivate is our emunah, our faith. Faith is what holds on even when it's dark. So faith, if we're going to put it into the context of the relationship, faith is that commitment and the belief in the other person that even when they're in such a deep state of emotion that they're not able to share with you, that they're still there with you and that they care about you, even though they're being quiet. And that's what holds, that's the glue that allows it to then continue, right? And similarly with Hashem, we have to cultivate our emunah during times of darkness. That's where we function from, is from the space of super rational connection, not rational connection. That's what we're going to close off with today. I'll just quickly review. We opened up, we're trying to understand this turning point in the Megillah where we say Hashem was sleeping and then he woke up. How can he wake up if it's so dark? What does that mean? What does it mean that Hashem woke up? And we're trying to understand this idea of sleeping and darkness and the advantage that we can find within that darkness. And we're going to explore this more, God willing, next week.